Hey, this is Brian Kemper from Stand True Pro-Life Outreach and Priests for Life. Once again, I'm honored to be part of the official March for Life youth rally in Washington, D.C., the day before the March for Life at the Renaissance. With the theme of the march this year being pro-life is pro-science, unique from day one. We know from day one when the sperm and the egg unite that we are a unique human person growing and developing. And that's why we're against abortion, because abortion ends a human life. I hope you'll come to join us at the March for Life and come to the March for Life youth rally. Be encouraged, be inspired, and be equipped to go out and be a voice for the generation that will end abortion.
It's beautiful weather.
Hey, God bless you, Father. Thanks for all you do, Father. God bless you.
How'd you get the front row seat?
We're hours and hours.
What time did you arrive?
About 10 o'clock. Yeah.
That's how you have to do it.
Hi, Father. Hey, Father. Hi.
Good to see you. How are you?
Andy Harris. I'm a congressman representing parts of Maryland. Before I went to Congress, I was in the state Senate, and when I was deciding whether to run for the state Senate in 1998, the evening I made my decision was an evening when I was listening to Father Pavone on the Defend Life program, talking about how there are different vocations in the pro-life movement, and one of those could be a political vocation. And that's the evening I decided to run for the state Senate, and eventually got elected to Congress.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for EWTN's special coverage of the 2017 March for Life. I'm Lauren Ashburn, anchor and managing editor of EWTN News Nightly, and we are so glad to have you along for this important day in the pro-life movement. All day long, you'll see the abortion counter on your screen. It just started at 9 o'clock Eastern. It will be the number of abortions since that time. It's the amount of lives lost all over the world. This is according to the World Health Organization. Now, every year in the world, there are an estimated 40 to 50 million abortions. This corresponds to approximately 125,000 abortions per day. It's a figure that needs to drop, and it's a reason thousands will be here in Washington, D.C. to march. There is so much going on. The Archdiocese of Washington hosted a youth rally this morning, and we are going to talk to some young adults coming up. Right now at the Verizon Center here in Washington, a Mass is being celebrated by Cardinal Donald Wuerl. At 11:45, the rally begins at the National Mall, followed by the March for Life at noon. And speakers include Vice President Mike Pence, Kellyanne Conway, senior counselor to President Trump, Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York, Benjamin Watson of the Baltimore Ravens, Abby Johnson, former Planned Parenthood director, and many more. The March for Life rally will take place at noon on the grounds of the Washington Monument. Following that rally, the march will begin on Constitution Avenue all the way to the Supreme Court, and that's 1 o'clock. Okay, we have team coverage today. Teresa Tomeo, host of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio, is out in the rally grounds, and Damon Owens, the executive director of the Theology of the Body Institute, is near her. They are at the Washington Monument and are going to be talking to pro-lifers today. Let's say hello to them. Good morning.
Hey, Lauren, good morning. This is so exciting. We are here, and boy, what a different morning it's been already, right, David?
Already. The years that we've had to cover with the march here and the marches that we've been to even on our own, we're already seeing this march is going to be unlike any one that we've seen before.
Went through security, Lauren, and the crew had to get here quite a bit earlier, obviously, and there's probably about 15 metal detectors where the crowds will be walking through, at least.
There's more.
I hope there's more than that. But yeah, it's very interesting. The mood here has been so uplifting all week long, and especially when the president actually mentioned the March for Life in an interview on ABC News on a Wednesday. And then we started to get inklings that, you know what, something is different, because our crew was hearing about security issues. And that's when we knew that, although obviously huge to have Kellyanne Conway here, the chief counsel to the president, as you mentioned, and also longtime pro-life activist. So it's going to be great to hear from her. But then to actually have a sitting vice president speak at the rally, as you mentioned, it's unprecedented. Now, in past marches, we know that President Reagan, for example, called into the march, President Bush called into the march, but not physically here at the rally.
And what that causes in terms of the rally here is a change in everything that we've known. If you've been here for many of the marches or certainly watched the coverage here on EWTN, you know that there's a certain pace, there's a certain accessibility that we have both to people we interview, for the number of people that wander from the rally area into the march area. There's a certain ease that happens, almost like a festival. Right. But that's not going to be this year. Not with, you said 15, there may be closer to 30, but that's still not enough security gate points that are going to have hundreds of thousands of people to go through. So, Teresa, I'm not sure what to expect in terms of attendance as they trickle in. We've seen this at the World Meeting of Families last September in Philadelphia. That was kind of a nightmare, but I still expect, like every year, the joy, whether or not the sun is out or not, there's just something about the fellowship, there's something about the day. And for those of you who have not witnessed the March for Life before, we welcome you to EWTN. We welcome you to the March for Life, the only network that covers this march pole to pole.
Yes, gavel to gavel, as we say in the business. Yeah, and I do think that because of the mood here, the people, the pro-life people are so peaceful and so loving and so polite. Everyone is going to be patient because everyone is so excited about Mike Pence and Kellyanne Conway speaking, Lauren. And just in talking with people on the street and at our hotel, they're just thrilled to be here. And so it'll be a little bit, you know, probably a little bit, things will move a little bit more slowly, but I still think it's going to be an amazing thing to witness and to hear the cheers, I'm sure, for the vice president. And also, we believe that the president may be calling in as well. And who knows, with Donald Trump, he could even show up.
Well, certainly we'll get a tweet or something, but he may actually show up. But, you know, there's a couple of other factors that factor in, I think, to people's attendance. And last year we saw a bit of a drop in attendance. Still, you know, 250, and the snow that came in was unbelievable. Most of us even got stuck in that, and the pictures from that are epic, and you sort of wear that as a badge of honor. But this year the weather is expected to be relatively nice for Washington, D.C. in late January. The sun, 50 degrees. I think that's attractive for people to get on the buses and the buses to come through. And then, of course, you had the election. This is an election year in general. You had Kellyanne Conway early on saying that she would be there, and then, of course, as we mentioned, Vice President Pence. I think this is the mix, maybe even the perfect storm of perhaps the largest march that we've ever seen.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the media coverage, Lauren, before we throw it back to you. And Damon and I were just discussing before we went on air at 9 o'clock that we've noticed more and more media covering this. I just did a radio interview with a Catholic radio station, and they're based in the Midwest, and they said that in Minneapolis, one of the major network affiliates led with, they didn't call it the anti-abortion march, they led with the March for Life. The same thing in another affiliate in Philadelphia. The lead story this morning on the local news with seminarians and students coming from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. The lead story on their morning news this morning. The New York Times did a piece yesterday, not exactly complimentary, but the fact that they're being forced to talk about it and write about it, I mean, I feel like I'm in an alternate universe or something, because we've been under the radar screen. Nobody has even paid any attention to us except EWTN and some other conservative outlets, but certainly nobody has given it the attention that we have.
And of course, it's never the point. We talk about this every year. The numbers, the weather, who's speaking, these things are sort of the peripheral. The power that you'll see today in this broadcast from gavel to gavel is the people that come out for this. If you've never seen this march, or if you think this happens once or twice, this is the 44th march. And where in the history of the United States or anywhere for 44 years do you have hundreds of thousands of people come peacefully into Washington, D.C. to talk about such an important issue? So what the beauty of you'll see today are the people, the message. It'll be uplifting, unlike the previous march that has been all over the news. So this is going to be an exciting and a fun day, even with such a terrible and a tragic anniversary. It's also a fellowship and a gathering of people who really care about life from womb to tomb. And that's what we're going to share with you.
Celebrating life. And Lauren, we'll throw it back to you. We're getting our guests are starting to trickle in. It's a little bit slower on that end because of the security issues, but we do have several people here that we're ready to talk to, but we'll throw it back to the studio to you right now.
Great. All right, thank you so much, Teresa and Damon. We'll look forward to your coverage all day long. In addition to Teresa and Damon, we have coverage for our Spanish-speaking friends on EWTN. Astrid Bennett Gutierrez is hosting the March for Life's coverage from our Orange County, California studios. Good morning, Astrid.
Greeting viewers of EWTN. This is Astrid Bennett Gutierrez coming to you from the EWTN West Coast studios in Orange County, California. And we are here to cover the National March for Life for the Spanish-speaking audience of EWTN. We are so excited to bring this event because the Hispanic people are a people of life. But sadly, here in the U.S., 25% of abortions are done on Hispanic women, and yet we only make 18% of the population. So we're so grateful to EWTN for bringing this message to Hispanics, and we love seeing every year more and more Hispanic families braving the cold out in Washington, D.C. to say that we are a people of life. Thank you so much for supporting EWTN, and please pray for the Hispanic community to be more involved because we are a sleeping giant that are going to help to end abortion in this country and all over the world. Thank you very much. God bless you.
And you too. Thank you, Astrid. We are also thrilled to have Monsignor Charles Pope with us. He's a priest with the Archdiocese of Washington and has served on the Priest Council, the College of Consultors, and the Priest Personnel Board. Monsignor, could you start our coverage with a prayer, please?
Lord, we bless you and thank you for the gift of our life and the life of every human person. And we're aware, Lord, that before you ever formed us in our mother's womb, you knew us, you thought about us, loved us, and prepared for us. And you knit us together in our mother's womb. And every one of our days is written in your book before one of them ever came to be. We're wonderfully, fearfully made. Help us to know that about ourselves and about every other human person we encounter, the great mystery of your love caught up in their existence. And help us to honor it and reverence it from conception to natural death. We thank you, Lord. We praise you for the gift of human life. And for everyone who comes to honor that great gift, we also ask many blessings today, traveling mercies, and much great joy in the gift of the sacred gift of human life. I make this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Monsignor, and we are thrilled to have you here. This March for Life began in 1974 on January 22nd, and that is the first anniversary of the Supreme Court decision. It was founded by Nellie Gray, the pro-life movement, and protesters wore red. And that's why we have the red roses here on the set today, and I think you'll see a lot of red as a symbol of the preborn child. What has your involvement been with the pro-life march over the years?
Well, I've lived in the D.C. area since '72, so I remember some of those early marches too, and coming down, and sometimes we had snow up to our knees, and sometimes it was relatively mild like today.
Last year was a blizzard.
But the point is, we were always here. I remember one year with Reagan's, I think, second inaugural, it was so cold that it was below zero, that they moved everything inside. But we were out the next day, and it was even colder. We were still outside, and we
still
marched.
Outside marching.
It was a witness, but yeah.
This is a very important time for many people. We saw the Women's March last weekend, a day after the inauguration. Some say there were 1 million that marched around the world. And traditionally, we haven't seen a lot of media coverage of this event. We have heard from Jeannie Mancini, who is the president of the March for Life, that this year she has seen an uptick in requests from media. Can you talk a little bit about the media coverage and what you have seen over the years?
Yeah, I would say that we are probably the largest single march every year we come. And it's arguable that we turn out larger numbers, maybe not than every single march, but we turn out huge numbers, and yet it's underreported. In fact, almost never reported. And the media's power isn't just in what it reports, but what it does not report. And I think after this great, this remarkable coverage that they had all through the inauguration and then the Women's March, I think to some degree, with the remarks of the president and vice president and so on, that almost shamed the media into the wider media into covering it. It is a huge turnout every year. It's a great event. And
it is a great event. You're absolutely right. I want to turn to what you do on a daily basis. You blog, and everybody can go online at the Archdiocese of Washington's website and read your daily blog. You wrote this week on the subtler psychological impacts of abortion. Tell us about those.
Yeah, I think we're as far as the roots of abortion, I think obviously lust and greed and so on are pretty obvious roots. But a more subtle root, I think, is our modern, well, comfort culture. We live very comfortably. I mean, especially even 100 years ago, running water and electrical lights and all were rare, and nice heating and so on. So there was a lot of, we've gotten very accustomed to comfort, and we have a strong aversion to discomfort. And not even just physical discomforts, but even making someone feel uncomfortable. And today we talk about microaggressions and so, but...
And road rage, but,
yeah.
But what does that have to do with getting an abortion? Are you equating getting an abortion with a woman not feeling comfortable and not wanting to feel the discomfort of pregnancy?
It's part of the psychology of it. And not only for those who support abortion, but even for those of us who are supposed to be speaking, and all of us speaking against abortion, there is this idea that, well, having a child would make me feel uncomfortable right now, or cause me to suffer in some way, or maybe have a career setback, or any number of possibilities. And I think at some level we have to accept the fact that life isn't always going to be comfortable, and sometimes we have to do the right thing even when it makes us feel uncomfortable or when it causes us to suffer. We have to do the right thing. And we're very averse to talking about that. And even in the church, we're very averse to holding up the cross and saying, this is the way we have to live.
Okay, Monsignor, we are going to talk a lot about that and a lot about what it means to be Catholic as it relates to abortion. But first, let's talk a little bit about social media. You're going to notice at the bottom of your screen, in addition to the abortion counter that we talked about, we're going to have some tweets and social media posts. Now, if you post something today regarding the march, use the hashtags EWTN, also the hashtag WhyWeMarch, hashtag Power of One, and hashtag WhyIMarch. Go to EWTN.com/pro-life for a list of members of Congress. You can tweet to them and let them know that you stand for life. You can show your support for the March for Life with a Twibbon. That is a filter over your current Twitter profile, and you can find a link on my Twitter page at Lauren Ashburn. As I mentioned, Mass is going on right now at the Verizon Center, which is in downtown Washington, D.C. We want to show you some of that beautiful Mass on this 2017 March for Life.
On January 12th, 2005, I got a call that changed my life. Hi, it's Dad. Your mom just delivered your baby sister. Mom's okay, but there's something wrong with the baby. She probably won't make it through the night. I was 14 years old, and I felt that my world was spinning with mixed emotions. I felt anger at my parents for having another baby, their 8th. I felt fear that our perfect family would now be handicapped, deformed in some way. And I felt a deep connection that I couldn't ignore, a connection to this new little sister, this new little life that I had never even met. Jeanette Isabella, my sister, was born with trisomy 18, a rare chromosomal condition similar to Down syndrome, but much more severe. Most babies with trisomy 18 don't make it to birth. Those that do usually die within the first year of life. When Jeanette was born by emergency C-section, she was immediately placed on life support because she came out of the womb and she didn't take a breath. After a day or so of watching the machines breathe for their little girl, my parents made the brave decision to remove life support and hope that she would live on her own. She did. Her tiny lungs moved in and out as she took her first step into life on her own. A few days after, my parents brought her home to meet us. The doctors had told them that they were bringing her home to make her comfortable. At any moment, her lungs could fail, her heart could stop, and she would die. When I met her, I was first struck by her smallness, her different physical features, and her peculiar breathing. And then I began to notice her contagious smile, her sweet demeanor, and her deep, piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right into your soul. I have to admit, this time was bittersweet for me. We had just uprooted our lives and moved more than 700 miles away from my hometown. My biggest worries were about making friends, fitting in, and starting high school. I felt weird enough being Catholic, being part of a large family. The last thing I felt I needed was to have a handicapped member of our family, especially one who wouldn't live more than a few months at best. I was angry. I thought, what is the point of a life like that? Wouldn't I be better off if she never existed? As we began to fold Jeanette into the daily fabric of our lives, I noticed something. I noticed how people were drawn to her. They stopped us everywhere, in the grocery store, on the street, on vacation, to ask us questions. Why is she so small? They would ask. Is there something wrong? We told her story over and over again. You could see their faces as we talked. At first stark, with fear and sympathy, and then they would soften as awe, respect, and hope would creep around the corners of their eyes. People would flock to my parents too, feeling that because of their witness, my parents were a place of solace, where they could share their own stories of life and love and grief, in miscarriage, stillbirth, or raising children with special needs. I noticed the strength and openness Jeanette brought out in those around her. I saw this especially in the way my mom poured out her whole life so that this little soul would be cared for. She gave up all of her sleep, pumping incessantly to keep a supply of milk because little Jeanette was too small to nurse. Many times I would wake up in the middle of the night and find her sleeping on the couch, simply unable to make it to her bed. Her exhaustion was so great. And still, she kept living, smiling, filled with a contagious joy that only comes when every second of your life is lived for someone else. I looked at my mother, heartbroken and frightened though she was, and I saw strength. I saw power. And I saw an unflagging spirit that would never give up despite the greatest of adversities. Talk about hearing a woman roar. My mother's example roared for me louder than anything I have heard before. Jeanette died on March 22nd, after living only 10 weeks with us. The seasonal flu passed through our family, and when it came Jeanette's turn, her tiny lungs and heart could not put up much of a fight. The funeral for this tiny 5-pound baby was standing room only. People poured in from everywhere, many who knew us and many more who didn't, who had only heard stories about the little girl that was born into an impossible life and the family who accepted her with love. It was her death that made me realize how small and narrow my original anger had been. It was her life that showed me how great and beautiful the world could be with a little hope and a little faith. Her dying filled me with sadness, but even more overwhelmingly with joy. Joy that I had gotten the opportunity to see her smile, look into her eyes, and feel her wrap her little fingers around mine. Her life, the one I had called a life without hope, filled me with so much hope and joy and love that I could hardly contain it. It's remarkable to think that she possessed the ability to have such an impact on my life and the life of everyone who met her without uttering a word. I carry Jeanette with me always, but the impact her life brought to mine came flooding back recently as I got married and found out I was pregnant with a little girl. There is an incredible uncertainty inherent in the process of life in the womb. And as I could feel my daughter kick and squirm and flip inside of me, sometimes I would think, am I ready for this? What if something is wrong with her? And my heart would be filled with fear. And it was in these moments that I thought about what Jeanette taught me and why I stand for life. Because the beauty of new life brought into the world and the privilege of being asked to serve as a bearer of that gift is so much bigger and so much brighter and more powerful than the most devastating of physical defects. I committed myself to loving my daughter, no matter her capabilities, her potential, or her future. And when she was born, perfectly healthy and beautiful, we named her Isabella in memory of the aunt that she would never meet and the soul that had changed the world, changed my world, with just the briefest of moments here on this earth. Standing up for life can be terrifying and hard. The world around us tells us to seek comfort above all things, that suffering is medieval and should be avoided at all costs. We live in a world where we are constantly taught to seek approval in likes and retweets and shares. But when you choose to swim against the tide, to fight the current of complacency, and to do what is right, no matter the cost, the rewards are abundant. Today, when I look out into this sea of faces, I see thousands of individuals who are bright, young, and hopeful. I see bravery. I see strength. I see character. I see men and women who are taking on the challenge of fighting for those who have no ability to fight for themselves. Men and women who march year after year for lives that others have called optional. I see future mothers and fathers. Look around you. Some of you standing in this crowd right now have a capacity for strength that you haven't even begun to tap into. You are going to be called to be heroes, to be parents of children the world will find inconvenient and useless. And you will stand. You will rise. You will live out your life as an example that they will never forget of the joy and hope and love that exists in all life, no matter how weak. Because this is my generation. This is our generation. This is the generation that will demand respect for life because it will never back down. It will never give up on its mission, no matter how hard it gets. So today I ask you, in memory of my sister, when you are faced with fear and you don't know where to turn, choose courage, choose love, choose life, and never give up that fight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Damon and Teresa, that was just a wonderful testimony that we just heard. I'm curious to see what the crowds are going to be like today and your thoughts on public opinion polls that we have been following. There's a Marist poll sponsored by the Knights of Columbus. 59% of Americans believe that abortion is morally wrong, and then 61% of Americans oppose the use of tax dollars to fund abortions in the United States. And yet, we don't have media coverage.
Absolutely. I think you were just talking about this on the media side as well as some interviews, and then we get countered with other statistics about whether or not we want to go to Roe v. Wade. The question of the polling question, should Roe v. Wade be repealed, and that has kind of a flip side on the other. But you've talked about this, Teresa. What do you see in these statistics?
This is my life. I mean, this is what I write about, and that's why I left the secular media. One of the reasons, because of the bias and because of just the not facing up to reality of the pro-life movement, acting as if we don't exist. And that's why, Lauren, when we were talking earlier, and I was on a Catholic radio interview, and they were telling me of all these different news interviews that were actually being done calling it the March for Life. I think the difference now is because the president, the vice president, of course, the chief White House advisor, Kellyanne Conway, have been bringing attention to this issue, especially this past week. And right after the so-called Women's March on Washington, Kellyanne Conway made a point, and so did Peggy Nance, who's the head of Concerned Women for America. She was debating someone on CNN, I think it was last week, and she says, we need to be back here next weekend because our people, as you said earlier, have been gathering for 44 years to the hundreds of thousands in terms of the numbers. And it's not a story, but it is a story. And we even see, I don't know if we can't get a shot with our cameras, but along the side of Constitution Avenue, I was just telling Damon before we went on with you, more media than we've ever seen before.
Yeah. Seriously. And I think, too, the Marist poll that you talk about, it's not just a top-down interest that's coming because of President Trump or Pence or Mayor Kellyanne Conway. This is tapping into what we've known for so many years. Right. That when you ask the right question about what abortion is, when you ask people the right questions, you're going to see not only the nuance in how people view it, the ignorance as well about what abortion actually is, but you start to see some of these tensions, and the higher numbers, as in the Marist poll, show that once people know what abortion is, they don't like it, and they want the restrictions on there.
That's the whole reason why they came up with the term pro-choice to begin with, because nobody wants to walk around and say they're pro-abortion. Why? If it's such a great thing, call yourself pro-abortion, but they always call themselves pro-choice. But we've seen recently that choice has nothing to do with carrying a child to term, giving birth. Yeah,
also
exactly.
They also say in the New York Times on all of the headlines. They say things like it is the anti-abortion rally. And to your point, Teresa, yesterday in Philadelphia, Trump said that the march crowd would be big and a lot of people are going to be showing up. That's a quote. And he says, you know, the press never gives them the credit they deserve. They'll have 300, 400, 500, 600,000 people. You know, you won't even read about it. When other people show up, you read big time about it. Right? So it's not fair, but nothing is fair about the media. And I think that you're right, that Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, talking about this rally is driving media coverage.
It's epic, and we're going to see this year, we talked earlier in that first segment about what would be the impact. And, you know, it's usually the weather or it's other things, but when the President of the United States, as you just said, Lauren, has that kind of promotion, and most people don't even know what this is happening. We get hundreds of thousands of people here, and again, this is the 44th March. This isn't once, twice, 3, 5, 10 times, 44th March. And there's a bit of a frustration we talk about every year about that coverage, but it's more of a shrugging our shoulders, like how can you ignore something like this? So I think what President Trump has done is to shine a bright light on something that we have been living for so many years.
I really think and I heard your guest earlier, we were listening to the interview that did, Lauren, and he was saying that it's also not just what the media cover, but what they don't cover. So if they don't cover it, they can pretend that we don't exist. And if we don't exist, if 500,000 people coming almost every year since 1973, if we don't exist, if there aren't all these people representing, if there's half a million here, they represent how many hundreds of thousands that are out there, and the poll, you know, you just showed proved that. But if they can say or pretend that we don't exist, then they don't have to address the issues. They can just put it aside and act like this is law, this was set, precedent was set by the Supreme Court decision. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Just move on with your lives. But here we are, 44 years later, and it's still being debated.
Teresa.
Yes.
It is. And you know, one of Donald Trump's first acts as president, one of his first acts was banning federal funds for international groups performing abortions. And it's known as the Mexico City policy because President Reagan announced the policy in Mexico City. And he has vowed to support the defunding of Planned Parenthood. One of the first acts that shows us that the tide could be turning for pro-life supporters.
I totally agree, and I think, again, the spotlight is very, very important because you have to have the media talking about this, because even within the pro-life movement, and my husband, who's a deacon in the Catholic Church and also a sidewalk counselor, is out every Saturday at the abortion mills on infamous 8 Mile in Detroit, and he is with pro-lifers with a lot of experience, and a few months ago he was with a woman. They were talking about the election, they were talking about the pro-life issue, and this was a dedicated Catholic woman, a pro-lifer, but she did not know. She was stunned to learn, Lauren, that through Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Volton, we were given abortion on demand through 9 months. And she was not aware that it was available through 9 months. Now, many states have restrictions, but it is still available. That's what Roe v. Wade gave us. And that's because the media don't cover the story, because people think, oh, it's only in the first trimester.
That's true.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us, I'm Lauren Ashburn, and Teresa Tomeo and Damon Owens are out in the field, and we are having a conversation about the importance of the government and their stance on abortion. Let's listen a little bit here to what David Muir of ABC interviewed Trump, and he said that you're going to have a very large crowd of people. I don't know, large or larger. Some people say it's going to be larger, and he's talking about then the Women's March, pro-life people, and they again say that the press doesn't cover them. And we are also going to see, for the first time ever, a government official, the Vice President of the United States, is going to be speaking at 12:20 today, the White House tells me, to the crowd.
Yeah, it's utterly. You think that this would be a normal thing, that we would get, a president
after 44 years.
After 44 years, but I just think it's again emblematic of where, as you said, Lauren and Damon, where this administration is going. You mentioned the Mexico City policy, and usually that's a sign, and especially since he did it the first Monday in office, did it very quickly, making a very strong statement. And President Obama, when he was it was 2009, I think the first week after his inauguration, he struck down the Mexico City policy, and that's one of the first things that Donald Trump did. So that's a very, very strong sign of where he's going.
Yeah, and I think like everyone, we're trying to read the tea leaves of President Trump. We don't. Nobody knows exactly what's going to go on or what's going to happen. But we also recognize that this march will come in season and out of season, and the fact that the attention from President Trump and Vice President Pence is just adding to what we experience every year, and we hope that more people can see not only who comes out but why we come out for this. So it's going to be an exciting time, and we look forward to bringing you the faces and the stories of not only those leaders in the movement, but also people just coming out to enjoy fellowship.
Well, we just have a report, Damon Owens and Teresa Tomeo, who are in the field for us, that Donald Trump, the President of the United States, will be calling into the march. And that is in addition to Vice President Mike Pence speaking at 12:20. All day long, you'll see the abortion counter at the bottom of our screen. It started at 9 a.m. and counts up a number of abortions since then, 27. It's the amount of lives lost all over the world. And right now it is more than 2,700. I said 27. Absolutely not. 2,700. We're going to go now to a very important guest, someone who is near and dear to my heart. EWTN is launching a new program. It's called Pro-Life Weekly. It premiered yesterday and re-airs today at 5:30 p.m. Former News Nightly reporter Catherine Zeltner is host of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly.
Good morning.
Good morning. So lovely to see you. You're wearing red for life. We've got our red roses.
Color coordinating with the studio.
That's exactly right. Tell us about your program and what should viewers expect when they tune in?
So EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, I mean, you were just a few minutes ago talking about the Mexico City policy. So much has happened this week alone when it comes to pro-life legislation. So on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, we hope to be the resource that viewers can tune in and hear the latest when it comes to legislation regarding abortion, regarding assisted suicide, and really to help our viewers become then engaged in the pro-life movement, to inform them and then give them the tools to become involved.
Well, for example, there's a new state law on abortion. Just last night, Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson signed into law a ban on common second trimester abortion procedures. I also see that you're working with the Susan B. Anthony list. What's their role?
Yes.
And what is the Susan B. Anthony list for some of our folks who don't know?
For our viewers that don't know, the Susan B. Anthony list is a pro-life advocacy group. They really help to elect pro-life leaders so that we can pass pro-life legislation.
And they're also lobbyists. Is that right?
Yes. So we're teaming up with them because they really really are the experts when they know what's going on in Capitol Hill. And one of the goals of this program is to bridge that gap between what's going on here in Washington, D.C., to bring that to our viewers at home so that they're in the know, so that they understand the conversations that are taking place with our legislation, and that they can then get involved with the call to action.
Tell us who we might see on the program tonight.
So, for those who can catch tonight's program re-airing of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, I was able to sit down with former Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina. Also spoke with the president of the Susan B. Anthony list, Marjorie Dannenfelser. We had an excellent panel discussion when it came to what the real impact of defunding Planned Parenthood will really mean for women's health. You're hearing a lot about that. Pro-life groups are focusing in on defunding Planned Parenthood, and you're hearing the abortion advocates and lobbyists say, well, this will hurt women's health. These experts say that's not the case.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We had a guest here on EWTN News Nightly earlier this week who talked about the fact that the women's health issue is not really an issue. Lila Rose was on, and they just released an undercover video that where they called Planned Parenthood and said, how can I get some information about prenatal care? And everyone that they called, or almost everyone that they called, said, no, we don't offer prenatal care.
I think there were like 5 out of 97 who did, and the rest of them didn't, which went to go, that just debunked one of Planned Parenthood's biggest talking points. We're for women's health, we're for prenatal care. No, they're not. And Live Action's action that they did with this past video was just an example of that. And so with EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, we hope to look at some of these common myths and just misconceptions that have been pushed forward for decades and untangle them and show really the truth as to what's going on.
I caught your show, and the thing that really struck me, Catherine, was when you spoke to the survivor of an abortion. It gave me goosebumps. Tell our audience about that conversation you had.
That was really powerful. It's definitely stayed with me. So Melissa Oden survived an abortion attempt, but she did not find out about it until she was about 14 years old. She was adopted into a very loving family, but she survived. And so she just released a new book that is available on EWTN's religious catalog called You Carried Me, where she explores her finding out about it and then her search for her birth mother. And I think the thing that kind of struck me most is she did meet her birth mother not that long ago, and her approach and her tone was one of great compassion. And that was striking because she got to see, here's this woman who was forced to have an abortion at a young age, 19. She was forced by her own mother to get an abortion. And she got to see this one for who she was and how she was a victim of the abortion advocacy and the lobbyists.
I was able to do the same thing. I'm adopted, and I wasn't a survivor of abortion, but I did find my birth mother. And what I wanted to say, the one thing I wanted to say was thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for giving me life. And it was one of the most beautiful moments, because I think that in this March for Life, in Pro-Life Weekly, there needs to be a big dialogue about adoption.
Yes, and I think holding up those brave women that do say yes to life and then give them off to another family that can raise a child, such as yourself. And these women need to be applauded, because that is brave of them.
It is brave, and especially at the time, I'm old, so especially at that time, in 1967, where you didn't have babies out of wedlock. It's a very different situation now. So I know that you will be talking about adoption issues.
Absolutely.
What do you hope that your program accomplishes? Is there a I want this?
I have so many hopes and goals for this program. One in particular, I would like to just create more dialogue from people who might disagree and have different stances, and to help equip our viewers with information and tools they need so that they can engage with their neighbor. You know, I think many of our viewers are so motivated in being pro-life, but might feel nervous when it comes to talking about that with their neighbor and with their friends. Abortion is probably the most divisive issue. It's uncomfortable to talk about. But if we can provide information and facts so that our viewers can walk away with confidence and then actually encounter the culture, well, it is culture that influences policy.
It is, and it's arts, and it's books, and it's literature, and there's just so much that does influence the culture. Catherine, best of luck with your new show. It's going to be fabulous.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, reports say that President Donald Trump is expected to address the crowd by phone this morning. Former Presidents Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush have done this at prior March for Life events, and this is in addition to Vice President Mike Pence, who will attend the march. We are going to now go back and check in with EWTN's Teresa Tomeo. Teresa, you have the president of 40 Days for Life. What is that organization?
Oh, I certainly do. Sean Carney from 40 Days for Life. It's an amazing ministry, Lauren, and boy, what stories that they can tell, and they do tell. As a matter of fact, 40 Days for Life is responsible for bringing Abby Johnson out of an abortion facility in Texas into the pro-life movement, and she now has an amazing ministry of her own, and it's just incredible what this organization has done. But enough with me. I want to talk to Sean, and Sean's going to tell us about 40 Days for Life. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. We're staying warm today in the sun this year's
nice.
March for Life. 40 Days for Life, the spring campaign, as you know, starts on March the 1st in 325 cities, and you're right, God has done amazing things. Abby walked right next door into my office. That Planned Parenthood where she worked actually closed and is now the headquarters.
Praise God.
Praise God. And it serves as the headquarters for 40 Days for Life now. And we just see that trend, a record number of abortion facilities closing, particularly over the last 3 to 4 years. And that's because of what we see today at the March for Life. There is a swelling of momentum in the pro-life movement, despite 44 years of legalized abortion. And we'll see today so many young people, a lot of strollers, a lot of college kids, a lot of high school kids. And that's so encouraging, despite those 44 years, and it should give us a lot of hope.
And 40 Days for Life began with the whole idea of 40 being such an important number in Scripture and to the people of God, correct?
It is. We see that number used throughout Scripture. We see the church use it. And the spring campaign is always done in conjunction with the season of Lent, and then the fall campaign is in the fall. And it's to, get out of ourselves and enter into 40 days of prayer and of fasting. The abortion issue is the defining moral issue of our lives. And it requires us to pray. It requires us to get out of the way, because otherwise we'll get mad and we'll get frustrated and we'll get angry. And we have to fall to our knees, we have to pray, and we got to show up to where these abortions actually happen. And we've seen nearly 13,000 moms at the very last moment choose life for their babies.
13,000.
13,000, and those are the ones that we know about. And now this is our 10 years of 40 Days for Life going national then international. We've met some of those kids. They're in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. They've been baptized. It's just beautiful to see, and it's a reminder to us as we're here today what's at stake and why we do this and who we serve.
Let me ask you one more question before I throw it back to Lauren in the studio. And Lauren was talking about, with Damon and myself, about the mood here and what it felt like. There is a different mood here. You and I were also speaking that we've never seen so many media trucks, live media trucks, but also the fact that we are going to have the Vice President of the United States, Kellyanne Conway, who was a long-time pro-lifer, long before she worked for the Donald Trump campaign, and as Lauren just confirmed, the President of the United States calling in. So this is huge for us. And not that we need that, because we will be here regardless of who shows up on the stage, but it's just a real, I think it is giving us a big shot in the arm, don't you think, Sean?
Absolutely, and it's a reflection, Trump's election is a reflection of what's been going on at the grassroots that nobody's been paying attention to, and he wanted...
We know that feeling.
Yeah, exactly, and he wanted a landslide. Everybody's like, what happened? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of pro-lifers and a lot of Catholics and a lot of people who want to see the direction of our country change, and we're certainly seeing that today, and you're right. There is definitely a different feel in the atmosphere in D.C., that's for sure.
Great to see you. The website, if people want more information?
40daysforlife.com. It's the number 40.
All right, Sean, good to see you. Keep the great work. Lauren, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Teresa Tomeo. We appreciate that. And your cohort, your colleague in chief, Damon Owens, is also on the National Mall with a very familiar face to EWTN.
All the moving parts of this 44th March for Life.
Yeah, well, I can remember growing up in Hawaii, going to my very first march at about the age of 8, and having the opportunity then over these 40 years plus to see the movement grow, to see it expand across the country. And what we're expecting to see here is even more young people. I can already see it today just walking here from the metro, the number of young people who are taking part in this, the high school kids and younger, college kids, millennials who are really engaged in this movement.
Yeah, that's exciting too, because we see it every year, as you said, in terms of growing, and yet even this year, it's hard to pigeonhole not only the attendees but also the overall spirit, and that's really the great gift of EWTN's coverage. Tell us a little bit about some of the cultural things that you see that a march this year would impact or at least color.
Right. Well, this year, of course, we have a very changed set of political circumstances. We have a pro-life Congress, we have a president and a vice president who are adamantly committed to the pro-life cause. So this, I think, for a lot of people, they see this as a moment of historic opportunity. We've been disappointed in the past, but there's a sense of optimism that you can see with the crowds already. Also, one of the things that strikes me about this year's march is this engagement with culture. We had last week a march in D.C. that was incredibly covered by the national media. 129 times more coverage for that march than they expect this one will get. And yet we're seeing a greater amount of media scrutiny about this march. And we saw in the coverage last week that pro-life women were excluded. That's an important point, because the media itself then is being forced more and more to address the pro-life movement. And it's a pro-life movement. It's not simply an anti-abortion movement. In sharp contrast to what we're seeing with other groups in culture, including the Women's March.
Now, isn't that part of the cultural encounter, not only in the visual and the advocacy, but also the language in describing it? And I would expect a march like this to help to engage and to set some rules for language, perhaps?
Yes. Language is always important. If you can control the language, you can control almost the whole of culture. So we are pro-life. The idea of being pro-choice is something very contrary to what they're actually proposing. It is pro-abortion. So if we can recapture the language, I think that's important. And at the base of that, at the very heart of it, is a recognition of the dignity of the human person that the Church has proclaimed from the very beginning. You can go all the way from Scripture to Pope Francis, and making people much more aware in culture of the idea of disposability, of the value of person made in the image and likeness of God. That's something that this march proclaims every year. And in that dialogue with culture, we're seeing more and more people being attuned to that, being receptive to it.
Yeah, Matthew, I love that emphasis, because one of the things that's been a little frustrating in all these years with the march is that, yes, it is anti-abortion, but to call it an anti-abortion march misses the mark of the entire purpose here. Like you said, the dignity of the human person and this womb to tomb, birth to or conception to natural death. So when I see the march and I see that diversity, it's annually frustrating not to see it exposed in that coverage.
Right. But at the same time, we're expanding the understanding of what life really is, what it is to be pro-life. And this is a thing in culture that you can see as a result of Roe v. Wade over the last 4 decades. We've had not just a coarsening of culture, but a loss of an understanding of that dignity. So that's why we see the expansion of things like a contraceptive culture, of euthanasia, of embryonic research that destroys a human person. And the pro-life movement then, by expanding that universe of what we're actually talking about, of who we are as pro-life people, respecting the dignity of the human person, as you say, from conception to natural death, we're helping all of culture to develop a deeper appreciation of the human person, which itself then enriches and enlivens the wider culture.
And that's what I hope the visuals and also the interviews and the people that big chance to meet, Lauren, are showing people that this is far more than just a political march to change laws about abortion. It's an essential part of it, right? It's an essential issue. It's the genocide of our time. But the reality is that what, Matthew, you're talking about is that we have such a broader and more substantial case and cause for what that the abortion is such an egregious violation against that. But there is the reality of life and the joy and the real purpose behind that. Is that fair?
Oh, I think that's very fair. Joy, you've hit on an important word too. We can contrast the different styles of marches that we have been seeing over the years. There's a heavy focus on abortion, on death, on a real negative approach to life itself. The pro-life movement from the very beginning, I remember, as I said, as a little kid growing up in Hawaii, marching around the state capitol with a sign. The thing that marked us most was the joy. We were obviously concerned, and still are, about where we are in culture. But you transform culture by bringing that joy, by that recognition of life itself and the beauty of life. And we always go back to the dignity of that human person.
Well, I'll tell you, you're singing my song. It's actually my new ministry, Joy to Be, the Joy. So the Joy, I think, is just something that is not only missing, but it's actually we have a responsibility to pursue that. So thank you so much. And if people want to follow you and read some of your writings or to listen to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me at ncregister.com. I'm with the National Catholic Register, and the Register is going to be covering this march very intently. We've got a lot of articles and pieces coming up.
Great, so great to be with you, and thank you so much, Matthew. Back to you, Lauren.
Damon, you're the executive director of the Theology of the Body Institute, and we will get to you in a little bit and to talk to you about exactly what the Theology of the Body Institute is. But for right now, let's go back to Monsignor Pope. Monsignor Pope is flying co-host here with me to talk about all things religious that I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to theology. So one thing I'm really interested in knowing, and I think a lot of our viewers are interested in knowing about, is the scripture readings. Are there scripture readings that support the pro-life movement?
Yeah. You know, I think that I always begin in speaking to people, when I begin with Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 5. And the Lord says there, before I ever formed you in the womb, I knew you. So there's no surprise pregnancies to God. No accidents or any of those kinds of things. God has always known and loved every human person that he creates in our time, but he's always known.
That's Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5.
Verse 5.
Okay, what else?
Psalm 139 is a very, very powerful reminder that it says it says that God knit us together in our mother's womb, that we're wonderfully, fearfully made, skillfully wrought in secret by the very hand of God, and that all of our days are written in his book before one of them ever came to be. And so all of those are, Psalm 139, really in total, would be a very good psalm to go to.
So you are part of an organization, or you run an organization that is based off of Proverbs 24. Tell us about that.
Yes, we unfortunately had a Planned Parenthood clinic open right here in the diocese, in my very deanery,
which is on Capitol Hill, right here in Washington. You're at Holy Comforter Catholic Church.
And so I just knew that we had to become more organized in our parishes to really be out there praying and witnessing for life in front of that clinic.
And so what did you do?
Well, we began to gather leaders, and we're growing our organization, and we're plugging into 40 Days for Life as well, but we're planning regular prayer vigils and sidewalk counselors in front of that, and we're doing our part as local parishes, even as we depend also on other organizations to assist us. And we called it Proverbs 24. Proverbs 24 verse 11 says this.
Let's listen to it.
Rescue those who are being dragged to death, and from those who are tottering to execution, withdraw not. And if you say, I did not know about this, does the Lord who tests hearts not perceive this? He who guards your life knows it, and he will repay everyone according to their deeds.
So the very first line is rescue those who are being dragged to death. Yeah. And to you, that means let's get in front of the Planned Parenthood clinics and do what? Because I think Planned Parenthood often paints the pro-life movement as being very radical.
Yeah. We pray mostly very quietly. We pray the rosary. We may sing hymns, but we also have sidewalk counselors who simply gently, as people go into the clinic, offer them materials and alternatives and say, you don't have to do this. And but we're always very polite. And if someone says they don't want to talk, we don't do it. So we do basically the same there that we would do with any pro-life demonstration in front of a clinic. We're not shaking angry signs and those things. Some do that, but our job is to pray, to give witness, and then to gently summon those to know who go in that there are alternatives.
I've also always been curious, are there saints who we could pray to for the cause of promoting the dignity of life?
You know, I want to preface what I'm about to say that 85% of abortions are performed on single women. So what we're dealing with in this country is largely a product of impurity, sexual impurity, and fornication, premarital sex. And so what we need to do is really preach purity. And Saint Maria Goretti is always the go-to saint for that. She was her boyfriend suggested illicit sexual union, and she resisted, and he eventually raped and killed her. And but she said, no, it's a sin. It's a sin. And she's the great saint.
So let's just recap for our viewers, because this is very important information. These teachings go back to Scripture. And you're saying that Proverbs 24:11, rescue those who are being dragged to death, number one. Psalm 139, which talks about knitting us together, and Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. Also, you're saying St. Maria Goretti is speaking about chastity in all of this. Do you address this in your blog? We can find your blog at the Archdiocese of Washington's website, and you write almost every day. Is that right?
I do,
What do you write about the issue of pro-life often?
I do. I write about all kinds of issues, mainly the intersection of culture and faith. That's what I tend to write on. And certainly I've talked about this. And also, again, St. Maria Goretti, the great saint. And so, all of these I do certainly cover there in great extent and among all the important issues today. There's so many.
So I want to delve deep into who Monsignor Charles Pope is. How about that?
Don't ask.
Let's talk about you and how did you figure out your vocation to the priesthood? And what did it have to do with life?
Yeah, my vocation story kind of begins funny. I was probably just in high school, very young, and there was a new choir being formed, and there were a lot of pretty girls in the choir, so, the church choir. So I said I joined the choir to meet girls.
And look at you now.
And I dated them.
It didn't work.
Well, but the Lord did show me my bride, which is the church.
Oh, right, of course.
But I eventually became a cantor and an organist and the choir director, and through all that involvement in liturgy, I began to feel. Although I was getting a computer science degree, I began to discover my heart's truest love was really with the church and the sacred liturgy, and so I began to move closer to the seminary. And about a year after college, I went into seminary. So.
And you've been pro-life and preaching ever since.
Yes.
We are going to get back to you and singing. I heard choir, I heard singing, and so we might have to do something about that.
All right.
You will notice at the bottom of your screen, in addition to the abortion counter, we also have some of your tweets and social media posts. So if you post something on Twitter or on Facebook, we want you to use the hashtags EWTN, hashtag Why We March, hashtag Power of One, and hashtag Why I March. We want to see those trending on Twitter. And you can show your support for the March for Life with a Twibbon, a Twitter ribbon. It's a Twibbon. It's a filter over your current profile picture on Twitter. And you can find a link on my Twitter page to it, and that is @LaurenAshburn. Thank you for staying with us this morning for EWTN's special coverage of the 2017 March for Life. I'm Lauren Ashburn, anchor and managing editor of EWTN News Nightly. We are glad to have you along for this important day in the pro-life movement. And we are also so happy to have Monsignor Charles Pope here, a priest with the Archdiocese of Washington. So, Monsignor, let's come back to you here and talk a little bit more about this study that came out. It's a study from the Journal of the American Medical Association. It suggests that women who are denied an abortion suffer the worse psychological effects than women who go through the procedure. This study was done with 1,000 people, 400 dropped out. So as far as the findings are concerned, I think a lot of people would say that those 400 would be really key to changing this. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Well, I've worked too long with Project Rachel to say that there are grave psychological effects.
Tell us about Project Rachel.
Project Rachel is an outreach of the church to women who have had abortion, post-abortive women, and men, because men also suffer great trauma. And, abortion is an act of violence, and women who go into these clinics are often not advised of these things. It's a very violent procedure in removing life from their womb. And very often there are very long-term psychological effects that sometimes happen many years later.
And I think that's the key, isn't it? I think that the key is, and I know many women who have had abortions who 20 years later all of a sudden think, what did I do? And the tears come. So we're going to be talking talking a little bit more about that Journal of American Medical Association study in just a minute. But EWTN's Teresa Tomeo is out on the mall. She is with all of the wonderful pro-life people who are walking and bringing signs and getting ready to hear all of the speakers, including the Vice President of the United States, who will be there at 12:20. Now she's talking, Teresa, right, to the Silent No More members. Tell us about that. Who are they?
Oh, amazing, amazing, amazing ministry, Lauren. And I'm blessed to have as my co-host on our Catholic View for Women program, of course, on Wednesdays, repeated on Friday mornings, Wednesdays at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on the EWTN network, with Janet Morana, who is Executive Director of Priests for Life and the co-founder of the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. And she is here to my far left. And then there's Leslie Blackwell, who's a regional coordinator for Silent No More, and Nancy Tanner, also a regional coordinator. Silent No More is a ministry that allows men and women who've been impacted by abortion, either having an abortion themselves, or men who have maybe have lost fatherhood, to join this ministry after they go through healing, to tell the truth about what abortion really does to people. And I'm going to start with Janet and have Janet give us a little bit of history of how the movement began. Janet.
Well, first of all, in 2002, Georgette Fournier and I got together and created the idea, basically, because we felt we knew so many women who had been hurting after abortion and gone through healing. And we said, you know, at the other side, they're out there trumpeting like abortion is great for women. And we said, no, we know it's damaging. And so we thought of a way to get them out there, being Silent No More. And actually, this is our 15th year of coming to Washington in front of the Supreme Court and giving testimony. So we want to invite everyone after the march to come up to the Supreme Court and hear these testimonies. We'll be up there probably about 2-3 hours.
And EWTN will be there. Our crew from EWTN News Nightly will be waiting, and they'll be covering that. So you'll be able to watch some of that, of course, Lauren, in our continued coverage.
And I'd like to point out, if they want to take these testimonies after the fact and spread them, just go to abortiontestimony.com. We have a search engine there. You want to see testimony of women who were raped and then had an abortion, they're there. You want to see testimonies of women who had first trimester or even late-term abortion, it's there. These women bravely give their stories for you to use them. And if there's anyone out there hurting, just go to abortionforgiveness.com, put in your zip code, you can see where's the nearest Rachel's Vineyard and other healing ministries right in your area. Because the other reason why these ladies speak out is we want to bring healing to this nation.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Lauren. Yesterday on my show, we were talking with Father Sheridan from Franciscan University, who's going to be joining me a little bit later, and we were talking about the march last week and about post-abortion and talking about the abortion issue and how the media, as you and I were discussing earlier, don't talk about us, don't talk about the issues and act as if we don't exist. And a man called in, and you ladies will appreciate this, and he was a very successful lawyer, and he said, my girlfriend and my wife, I think they were single at the time, but they eventually got married, had an abortion. And he said, I lost my child to abortion 42 years ago. And his voice started to crack during his time on my program, and you could hear the pain. He said, I've been through Project Rachel, I've gone through a weekend, he said, but at the same time, you know, there's still that loss. And this is something that you ladies hear all the time. Leslie, you were in the secular media, as I was, and you know, we bought into those lies as feminists growing up in the 70s.
It was all about my career, you know, and I ended up senior year of college finding out I was pregnant as I found out I had that dream job in TV. Went and took care of things, thought it was going to be just fine. Soon enough, you know, I was pregnant again. 2 abortions in about a year and a half. And it destroyed my television career. I ended up giving up my babies for a career. And then I was so broken, it destroyed it. I ended up getting back into the television business, but my golly, those abortions really did something profoundly deep in my soul. And they haunted me, and it took almost 30 years, Teresa, to finally deal with it, connecting the dots of that pain, the years of substance abuse, eating disorders, just feeling so unworthy. Thank the good Lord, He opened my eyes, and I started realizing that was really at the root of my problems. Yeah.
And thanks be to God for the healing and for the forgiveness. And Nancy, you and I have often spoken of the lies that Planned Parenthood tells about how wonderful and how you'll be fine after abortion. One of their latest, how do you want to say, advertisements or promotions for Planned Parenthood is that they're parading, Lauren, these young women out there who've had abortions after, let's say, a month or 6 weeks, and talking about how wonderful the quote-unquote clinic was. And yet, what you know through your work in Silent No More, and the research shows, afterabortion.org, great website with all kinds of research, the research shows that many women don't even realize, as you just said, Leslie, connecting the dots takes a while because they're thinking right away, well, I go in and quote unquote the problem is solved temporarily.
Relief's the first,
The initial feeling is that relief. It's like, oh, it's over. But that very quickly fades into a depression. And it hits everybody in different ways. But that's an unresolved grief that part of you has died. And to not go through healing further handicaps you the rest of your life. And people often don't realize, as you said, if you connect the dots, it's like, oh, all these other problems, all of a sudden it comes crashing in. We have women who have had abortions 30, 40 years ago that it's just registering with them now. Often when women hit the end of their child rearing years, it comes tumbling in, oh my gosh, what did I do? Different triggers in life, other losses. It all brings back to that one central loss, or multiple losses for some people, that you miss that child. It's not natural to kill your child, and your body knows that. And it'll come back and haunt people in different ways. But we're here to give the message of hope and healing, and God's mercy is greater than any sin, including abortion.
What's so frustrating to me as a new feminist in the Catholic Church is that we don't hear these voices out there in the public. Lauren, we were talking, we're media people, we've been in the news media our whole lives, and it's very frustrating on such an issue that so many people claim is such a right, that the voices of sisters, fellow feminists in many ways, they deny them the chance to speak, and often when they're at the Supreme Court, and we'll see a little bit later, the protesters try to drown them out with signs, get over it. And the news media concentrate, if they do show up, if the media do show up, what they're doing is they're actually focusing just on the Planned Parenthood people are there. There's always at least two sides to every story, and these stories need to be heard. The women who've gone through this, the men who are struggling with lost fatherhood. You will see the signs today on the rally stage, I regret my abortion, or I regret lost fatherhood. You're seeing more men involved, aren't you, Janet?
Absolutely, yeah. We got our first man back in 2004, but now more and more men, and now couples are actually giving testimony together, the husband and wife together, after going through.
I had a couple call into my show yesterday. They're coming here for the first time.
That's right, and so, you know, this is why you don't know, why do we have so much divorce in America? It's unhealed abortions, because their whole relationship as a couple has been destroyed because of that abortion. I can tell you stories where women say, I couldn't forgive my husband for the longest time. I had one of the girls on my radio program too, and interviewed her, and she said, our marriage, we went to counselor after counselor, no one was dealing with the abortion. It wasn't until they went on Rachel's Vineyard, dealt with the abortion together as a couple, and now their marriage has been healed. So we really want to encourage people, go to abortionforgiveness.com. The healing is there, and everyone listening right now, even if you don't know any, I'm guaranteeing you got to know someone who's had an abortion, but be ambassadors of this message. Encourage your priest to put that webpage, had an abortion, need help, abortionforgiveness.com. Should be in every parish bulletin. We have millions of hurting people, and if they want to know why the pews are emptying out, because they think the church is against them, we have to tell them the doors of the church are open. Christ's mercy is endless.
Teresa Deacon shouldn't be afraid of the message, because it always comes with a message of hope, healing, and love. As you said, God's mercy is new every morning. And do not think that if you had an abortion that God doesn't love you. That is simply a lie from the evil one. And again, the website for more information?
SilentNoMore.com, abortionforgiveness.com, and abortiontestimony.com. All the information's there.
And Lauren, we're just so grateful that we have the opportunity to allow these beautiful women to tell their stories, and for Janet to tell the history of this incredible ministry which continues. Back to you in the studio.
Teresa, thank you so much. Teresa Tomeo of EWTN. One thing that we can add to that is that 78% of Americans think that laws can protect both the well-being of a woman and the life of her unborn child. And now that we have in the White House a pro-life president and a pro-life vice president who did many things in his home state of Indiana to put into law rules regarding abortion, I think that we're going to see a lot of things change. Now, let's take a look. Make sure you know that at the bottom of our screen is the abortion counter. It just started at 9 in the morning. It counts the number of abortions since then. Look at that number. It's the amount of lives lost all over the world. It stands right now at more than 5,400, and we are only an hour and a little bit into all of this. Let's go back outside to where all of the action is happening, and Damon Owens is the executive director of Joy to Be Ministries. I said that earlier wrong, Damon. I gave your old title. So Joy to Be Ministries is where you are the executive director of. You're on the National Mall. I love all of the guests that you're talking to, and with you is Helene Shepard. She's with the Catholic Daughters of the Americans. I haven't heard of that group, so I'd love to hear what they're all about.
Yeah, part of the joy of being on the march here is meeting organizations like this who've, behind the scenes, without the cameras, have been doing so much work over the years. And yes, this is Helene Shepard, and we want to know more about the Catholic Daughters of the Americas. Tell us a little bit about your organization.
We're 114 years old. We're 66,000 strong in the nation, and we have branched out to Africa this past year, and 3 groups in Peru.
That's it. And you're with Sherry Nilles. And Sherry, you're joining Helene there. Tell us a little bit about your involvement and a little bit about the organization from your view.
From my view, I live in a very rural area, so this is a gathering of women who share the same spirituality, who enjoy each other, and we're making a difference, especially with the life issues for our children.
Now, this march, though, how does this fit into your mission and your dedication, really, for how many years now coming to the March for Life?
I personally have been coming since the first Vigil Mass in 1980, and our organization has been here for each and every march. We've met various challenges, and this year we meet the challenge of security, not snow.
Good for you. But when you come to the march like this, with your organization, tell our viewers a little bit about how the mission of Catholic Daughters of the Americas meshes with the March for Life and the different themes and the purpose for this kind of advocacy.
We are a pro-life organization. We are interested in life from conception to natural death. All of our members in our courts, in the 1,245 courts in the United States and throughout the Americas, we are gearing up for activities, all various according to the location. As Sherry said, in her area, the activities for pro-life are different. Here in New York, I know we subscribe to the 40 Days for Life, and many of our states do, and also the baby showers that go on, and the various pro-life activities are all for this cause.
So 114 years in the organization. You told me an interesting story earlier about Bishop Fulton Sheen and his encouragement for your organization. Why don't you share that with our viewers?
He said to us, we were originally, in 1903, Catholic Daughters of America, and in 1923 we became Catholic Daughters of the Americas when we branched out. And he said, ladies, you must now become Catholic Daughters of the world. And it's taken us many years, but we did go into Africa this year, and we have branched out. And we are willing to invite every Catholic woman to be part of our organization. It's a gift that we have given to ourselves, and we want to share that gift with every single Catholic woman.
Wow, Helene and Sherry, thank you so much, and God bless your organization. Lauren, you know, when we see the leaders of organizations, and we'll meet a number of them today, that has to be not just contrasted, but compared really to the people who come all over the mall today and all down the streets, and to see that there's a diversity and that there is a passion and a zeal way outside of the one day a year for the march, but it's infused here every year. So this is what makes it such a beautiful event.
Well, thank you so much, Damon. You know, this Day for Life started with a youth rally and mass at the Verizon Center and the D.C. Armory. Those are 2 locations here in Washington, D.C. that have been filled with youth. EWTN's Mark Irons, who works with us here at EWTN News Nightly, was at the Verizon Center. He talked to those young adults today.
Lauren, youth from across the country have been flooding into the Verizon Center for the Youth Rally and Mass for Life since 6:45 this morning. That's when doors open. Now, since Vice President Mike Pence will be speaking before the March for Life, there will be added security. That's why the start time for this event was moved up, to give these people enough time to leave here after Mass, to get out to the National Mall.